I'm delighted to say that we have a distinguished set of panelists with us tonight. The forum will be very much a part presentational, part questions and answers. So we do want to hear your views from the floor. So don't be shy, please, in coming forward with what you think about the various topics that have been selected. Let me quickly introduce, well, just say who we have, because I'm not going to be doing the introductions except for our moderator. But in the panel we have on my immediate left Jude Hanley, and next to her is Paul Goodeites-Peart. In the center we have our moderator Shana Smith. On her immediate left is Sherry De Castro, who you may well know, used to wear a crown, I believe. And on the far left is Dr. Carl Dawson from the college. So we have a very distinguished panel tonight. My job immediately is to introduce our moderator, Shana Smith, and she will then introduce the panelists individually. So, Shana Smith is a proud Virgin Islander who received her Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering in 1999 and a Master of Science degree in Industrial Engineering and Management Systems in 2002, both from the University of Central Florida in Orlando. Ms. Smith began her public service career in April 2003 with the Ministry of Finance and served for 8 years in various positions as Senior Project Officer in Project Engineer and Manager, Project Support Services Unit. Well, one of the key duties was to advise the Financial Secretary on project policy and provide strategic and operational planning advice to ministries and departments. She resigned in April 2011 to pursue her dream as a management consultant. Currently, she is the Managing Director of Smith & Associates, a consultancy firm that specializes in project planning and business development, and one of her current assignments is the Assistant Project Engineer on the new Peebles Hospital project. Ms. Smith believes wholeheartedly in community service and that a community is only as strong as its weakest link. She's an active member of the New Life Baptist Church, subscribes to the belief that to whom much is given, much is expected, and has been involved in several civic organizations. But I note she doesn't list Rotary as part of those yet. One of her many hobbies is being the executive producer and host of the TV program Vigilante Dialogues, a platform that she uses to educate and empower the public on community issues. Her latest community activism endeavor was as a territorial political candidate in the 2011 general elections with the People's Patriotic Alliance. Shana believes that the future of her homeland rests on quality decisions being made that will drive the quality of life for every citizen and provide socio-economic opportunities, especially for the next generation. I give you Ms. Shana Smith.
President Charles, Rotary Club of Roadtown, and guests, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me here tonight as your moderator for this very important topic and discussion that we're about to have. And without any further ado, I will introduce the panelists. Starting on my left, at the end, Dr. Carl Dawson is the fourth and current president at the H.L. Stout Community College in the Virgin Islands. A native Virgin Islander, he received his early education here and then attended the University of the West Indies in Barbados and the Bahamas, where he earned a bachelor's degree in hotel management in 1990. Following that experience, he worked in the tourism industry for 2 years before joining the faculty at the then recently opened H.L. Stout Community College in the British Virgin Islands. In 2003, he embarked on doctoral studies at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and he was awarded the Doctor of Philosophy with a concentration in higher education administration in May 2007. His dissertation is entitled Organizational Learning in a Community College. He's also keen on using his research skills to help provide information for solving social problems in the Virgin Islands. Dr. Dawson is married to the former Janice Reimer and they have 3 children. He is very active in the Methodist Church in the BVI and is also a lover of music and plays the cello. Dr. Dawson. Miss Shari DeCastro is a 22-year-old native of the British Virgin Islands and graduate of Texas Christian University. Determined to make a difference in her country and the world, Miss DeCastro is currently an English teacher at the Elmo Stout High School. She is also a well-known poet whose first book of original poetry is slated to be released in the coming months. Miss DeCastro firmly believes that life begins at the end of your comfort zone. As a result, she enjoys doing things that will challenge her and build character. For example, pageantry. As the former Miss British Virgin Islands, while still holding the title of Miss Caribbean World, Ms. DeCastro will be leaving the British Virgin Islands next month to represent her country in Moscow, Russia at the Miss Universe pageant. Miss Shari DeCastro. Mr. Paul Pert, better known as Gadites. Gadites is a well-known local radio personality. Mr. Pert is host of the Morning Ride show on Z-Rod FM and also the station's marketing manager. His occupation brings him direct contact with all levels of society and all ages. His unique insights comes to this exposure and the frank manner in which he addresses the issues makes him a popular figure with grassroots and high-ranking individuals alike. He is a devoted father of a young infant and he takes great pride and pleasure in sharing parental responsibilities. Mr. Paul Pert. Miss Jude Hanley. Jude is an associate with the Business and Trust Law Group in the British Virgin Islands of Auger. She advises on various aspects of finance, corporate, and commercial matters. Jude also serves as business law lecturer at the H. Laverty Stout Community College. Prior to joining Auger, Jude was employed as a Crown Counsel for 4 years within the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Jude graduated from the University West of England, Bristol, with an LLB honors degree in law in 2007 and earned her diploma in legal practice from Inns of Court School of Law in 2008. She currently serves as the treasurer of the BVI Bar Association. Miss Jude Hanley. Okay, the format for tonight is that we will have each panelist just give a brief opening statement. We've already introduced them, and we will go right into the topics. Tonight we have 3 areas that we will be discussing around peer acceptance and validation, failing to help youth succeed, and working with the new family unit to promote healthy youth development. After we've gone through, the panelists have discussed the various topics, we will have then a question and answer segment where we'll ask you, the audience, for your comments and questions to also stimulate the discussion that we're going to have tonight. So I'm going to start on my far left with Dr. Dawson.
Thank you very much, Shayna, and I say good night to President Charles and all Rotarians, and say how much of a pleasure it is for me to have been asked to share in this forum tonight, especially given the panelists and moderators that we have here with us. I will say that as much as I've come here as a panelist, because of the number of interactors and rotaractors that I know would be present, I also came here very much to listen, because I believe that as the song says, who feels it knows it. I'm long past my youth, and the individuals that are here are in some ways much more in touch with the issues that young people are facing, which are different than those that I faced not too long ago. And as much as I believe, though, that the young people are key in finding solutions to the issues that face them, I will also refer to another song by our own Lashing Dogs that says a lot of things that the children doing these days, I blame the parents for them. That's to say, as we as adults in our community, I believe that we have a lot to do in shaping the environment in which our children are raised and the environment in which they interact. I think that there are choices that can be made at various levels. There are choices that can be made at the government levels, for instance, even about what types of TV programs are allowed to be brought in through our cable TV systems. There's decisions that can be made at the level of the education department with respect to the curriculum. There are decisions that can be made within the community and also at the level of the home. So I do believe that there is hope because there are choices being made all the time. And I think that if we are making the right choices, then a lot of the issues that face our youth, as will be outlined here today, the fact that so many are not reaching their potential, the fact that so many seem to be less than fully occupied, this fact that so many seem to find themselves ending up in balsam gut, the fact that so many are not achieving the way in school that they should, I believe that there are choices that we can make that can have a positive impact on the lives of our young people. Thank you, Shana.
Thank you, Dr. Dawson. Now I invite Missy Castro.
Good night, everyone. Let me first say that it is a pleasure, an absolute pleasure for me to be here tonight. I would say that I will share a very interesting perspective. Being a young person myself, I still consider myself to be, and being a teacher, I have direct contact with our young people every single day in the high school setting. And so I will be able to, I believe, touch on some of the inside issues that we face, especially in education. And those that erupt from that, particularly from the home, with different issues, parental issues, and things of the sort, as well as how I believe the government, but not just them. I do not believe that issues such as education are government responsibility, but a community responsibility. So how community organizations such as this can do their part to motivate our young people and create opportunity for them in terms of in various areas, whether it's community service, entrepreneurship, and the list goes on. So I look forward to the discussion, and as a teacher, I never stop learning, so I'm looking forward to learning as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castro. I'll now ask Garais to share his thoughts.
First and foremost, let me say thanks to the Rotary Club to really give me this opportunity to be a part of this panel to discuss the issues that is affecting the young people, the way forward, and the changes that some of the adults or parents will have to make to reach to our young people. And as far as giving the young people independence in this time to be their own masters and creators of their destiny, I look forward to hearing questions from the crowd, the audience, and hope I can give some answers as to my experience that I've had over the years of growing up. Thank you.
Thank you, Garais. So now I invite Jude.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I must say I too am happy to be here. I think I may very well end up being the devil's advocate at this table, and it is not very intentional. At first, because as you know, I was one of the persons that were literally called 2 hours ago to join, and I was a bit concerned in terms of how the panel discussions would run. But having heard Dr. Dawson's, one of his theories here about perhaps regulating certain shows on TV coming into the BVI, I'm already on edge because I have a completely different view on that. So I'm very excited to get the discussions going. I hope that whatever I say here benefits the BVI as a whole. I'm looking forward also to your views, and hopefully we're able to not just identify issues that are being faced by the youths, but realistic remedies to same. Okay,
Good.
Thank you.
All right, our panel is warm and ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we're going to start off with peer acceptance and validation. And one of the discussion points that we have is entitled Managing Conflict Among Youth. Youth conflict is prevalent, and the means and manner in which this manifests itself increasingly involves acts of violence. Youth today seem to have a shorter fuse, and they do not seem to be able to resolve conflict effectively. Let's discuss the potential causes of the conflict amongst youth, as well as strategies of managing the conflict amongst them. I think we'll start off with the causes. So I will pin up the table. Anyone who wants to start and share their thoughts. Guys? Oh, Jude jump first.
One of the main reasons why I believe that young people are acting out some of their behavior, it starts from the home, and children, they do what their parents do, and I think if we're really going to help these children, we'll have to change our actions as far as how we interact in front of our children, what we say, and how we treat each other as adults. And these children, they emulate us, and they take whatever they learn at home, bring it outside, so when they get in a conflict, they remember what they see at home in their environment, and they do what they see. So that's my take on that.
Okay. Jude, what's your take?
Okay. So,
Pull the mic closer.
okay, I do agree with Paul. I like Paul. I actually did make a note on that in terms of, but I did head it as persons coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds, where all students aren't the same, all youths aren't the same. They're coming from a completely different background, and some students, the environment that they come from, they're always on edge, and probably that may lead to them being unable to resolve conflict. But I also think that the community and the parents of the youths also should be instilling from a very, 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 very young age, as they are born and can understand positive value systems. I think we have a big issue with the value systems that exist in the Virgin Islands. In terms of, if you have a good value system, you would have things like respect on your list. If you can respect a person, you can respect a person's property, you can respect a person's opinion and their right to that. And I think once the youths are able to have a good, positive value system, that would help them to counter conflicts when they're trying to resolve any issues. I also think that conflicts among youth also arise from youths being, I hope I'm not taking all the answers down there. Good. And by all means, don't stop me because you don't want to talk. Another issue that I think plagues the youth in terms of not being able to manage conflicts is their inability, and I should have said this from the front, everything that I say is very relative to a particular youth that's in that position, and all youths are not the same, and I'm aware of that. But some of the youths that have these issues, they lack effective communication. For instance, if you have two, in my view, if you have two youths that have an issue and they need to resolve it, one youth may be able to have effective argumentative skills, and they know exactly what you're going to say before you say it, so they have their arguments lined up. And you may have another youth who is not as strong in communicating effectively and feels, for instance, to get my point across, I have to speak louder than you, I'm going to shout down your throat, or I have to show some type of action. So I think their inability to communicate effectively may also lead to having conflicts among youths in solving issues. And also, I think low self-esteem, but that also may come from the background in which they come from, where they feel they must show certain colors to keep up a certain title, but really and truly they don't really believe it, but I have to stay in tune with my crew. So those are my views as causes of why we have youths with many conflicts.
Okay.
I believe that this is a very touchy subject, mostly because I believe that we have strayed as a community from raising our children, and because of that, it's very sensitive for adults to discipline children holistically, because we have a lot of outside input and influence, whether it's from law or other means. But I believe that more than anything else, we no longer necessarily, I believe, can blame our children in terms of being delinquent. But I believe that we are now seeing an influx of delinquent parents. And for that, I say, because, it's one thing where, as much as parents are looking to see what their children grow into and what they become, children are looking at them as well. And, they see your actions way louder than what you say. And in so doing, that lack of what I call transparency in the home when it comes to how to deal with conflict, children then suffer a lot of disadvantages because they do not have that right or responsibility to come up with their own solution. So they make choices, but they don't necessarily have consequences as a result of. In so doing, I believe that, we have done a lot to sugarcoat a lot of things in terms of children. We sanitize everything. The playgrounds are no longer metal and they can't just bust their knee and figure out, well, I fell. It's all rubber and everything seems to be, the parents are always there, right by them. We no longer just sit on the bench and look on and watch them interact and allow them to make choices and in turn see how they then have to deal with these consequences. That's our decision making, critical thinking. And it begins on the playground. So since we've seen so much, what I believe to say an intrusion of adult input in the growing process of children, they then are less capable of making decisions that will then produce good results.
Okay. Interesting. Dr. Dawson.
I'll just add a little piece, and I think I'll probably invoke the ire of my good colleague on the far right, because I think that there is, among a number of our young people, there's a culture of intolerance that is very popular. That is to say, it is popular to be intolerant of others. It's popular to know that if someone, as you said, just happened to brush up on you, it's not acceptable to just simply, say somebody just brushed up on me and you're gone. That the acceptable culture is that you must show yourself as tough and as not taking that. You can't diss me like that. And I think that while I don't know if to say that if I were to try to sanction or all television programs that speak of this, we wouldn't see any TV at all. I would tell you, Jude. But I think that that is a part of a popular culture. There's a part of, even I'd say rap music, that a lot of the songs you see and the attitudes that are coming out pervading in some of those performers really is about glorifying that sort of intolerant behavior. So I'm not looking to say that that's the only thing at issue here. And I will say that because I don't know that we'd ever control that, our solutions would have to be beyond that. Because a solution would not be, say, not exposing them, but our solutions would have to be beyond that arena.
Okay. I'm hearing you guys are starting to touch on the solutions and some of the notes I've made. So we're going to work on different areas because in Sherry's opening statement, she talked about the community issues that are going on with our youth are basically community issues. And it's easy sometimes for us to think that, the solution is to get a juvenile delinquency center to lock them up in. But we really need to get to the root of the matter, as it were. So one of the points that I made was in terms of, I've heard everyone touch on the influence of parents and the phrase used as a delinquent parent. So in terms of solutions, how do we deal with situations like that? For example, let's start in the home where you have, for example, we have situations I've heard talked about in terms of we have younger parents now versus, let's say, when my mother raised me, she was more mature. What influence or factor do you think that also plays into the situation that we have now? Because if you yourself don't have the decision-making skills or a value system or mature communication skills, how are you going to pass that on to your children? So I'd like you guys to speak on that and to also elaborate more in terms of how do we fix now the problem from the factors that you have highlighted and touched on. We know we hear about social development having parenting classes, but really and truly, is it having the impact that it needs to have, or do we need to look at some other strategy in terms of remedying the situation?
You touch on several good points, and there's an old saying that it takes a village to raise a child, and what we've lost focus on is the community playing its role when it comes on to our children. From the home perspective, you will have differences at home, where you'll have in our community where one mother has 2 or 3 different child's father. You know what I mean? And it starts from there, where these children start to compete at home and they take it on the road. Now, I remember when I was growing up, if I did something wrong on the road and my grandmother heard about it, before she heard about it, the person who saw me in the act would have stepped in and tried to correct me. And then when I reach home, I would get a correction again. But we become so selfish where it's my child, so I must do all the corrections. And to face the fact about it, we don't have time. We are doing 2 and 3 jobs, so therefore we don't have time to grow our children. And until we realize that we as a community will be affected by what these children are going to do in the future to come, we won't get a solution. So I believe it comes back to us as a community, start playing our role with these children and teach them as children. Don't try to be their best friend or their buddy, but be that adult figure that will guide them along the way, because they do need guidance. They're young, they don't know everything as much as we like to feel like they know everything, but we need to guide them, and it takes a community to bring us back to solving some of these problems.
Okay. Anyone on this side?
I'd add, it's so much about values, as has been said so more often tonight, and one of the things that we hope to do at the college, not to talk about work, but with our Virgin Islands Studies Institute, to study more about us as a people. Our focus in the past had been a lot about history and culture, and that will still be there, but also trying to understand sociological issues, psychological issues that have shaped us through the years. How did we get the value systems that we had? 40, 50 years ago, when someone like Rotary Ed was a little boy coming up, there were certain expectations. As a young man was expected to build a house, and then court a lady, marry, and put her in the house. There were other things that helped to shape us. And I always say, when somebody asks me what's wrong with the BVI, what happened, I always, as a country boy, I always say, sheep and goat. That's what happened. No sheep and goats. Because as a young person, there was a system where you came up and you had your place as far as your responsibilities within the home, the things that you had to do as an individual, as a contributing member of a family. Now, as our society changed, as our industries changed, and we moved from agriculture to tourism and eventually financial services, as well as all the secondary industries associated, you found now that there was no replacement for the sort of activities that at the time it seemed like, yes, it's about giving us food and something to eat, but it was about more than that. It was about instilling work ethic. It was about instilling responsibilities. But all of a sudden, because we shifted that, all of a sudden the same guys who would have to go and tend the cows in the afternoon now only can go on the basketball court. The girls got away a little bit easier, and that's why they're ahead as far as educational progress in the territory is concerned. That's why 2/3 of the students at the college, about close to 2/3 of the students at the college are girls as opposed to boys. I believe because the activities that they engaged in the home remained. After the things that the boys did fell aside and you weren't doing that anymore, the girls were doing those, so they were still able to develop some of those skills and so on. Some of the other things that helped to instill those things, the church has diminished, I would say, in its prominence in the lives of so many individuals. But the question isn't to say, well, the question is understanding why we lost it, but how do we get it back? We said about the parenting classes, but if we call a parenting class tonight, guess who's going to be there? I'm going to be there. And Pat is going to be there. And Ed is going to be there. The people who, as they say, who have nice children, will find ourselves there. And other persons who are challenged, just as Gadai says, not necessarily because they don't want to come, because those persons are in an income bracket that require them to work 2 and 3 jobs, they just don't have time to come to attend to these things. But I'll just add one thing, and I'll give up the mic because I'm hogging it here a little bit. But I think that once we understand what were the things that shaped us, and it may be that we cannot go back to those very things, but we may be able to find out what are the things that can be replaced. Now, one of the things that I think is useful is the clubs. Clubs such as those are formed in all of our schools and at the college level. But not just to say clubs, but clubs that have a particular purpose and objective. That is to say that we are consciously saying, when we organize a student club within our organizations or within our educational systems or communities, that there are objectives relative to teaching certain values, that there are objectives relative to teaching certain skills. And if we go in with that and train the leaders, and when I say clubs, I'm not just talking about the environmental club and the good clubs, I'm talking about a basketball team, because those are the guys we're going to get. We want to get those guys, and we have to get the leaders of those basketball teams to understand that the role that they're playing there is helping to shape individuals. And I believe when I look at on the courts, I see some guys there who are leaders, who are coaching these teams. And I believe that if we were to give them further training, that they will get on board with an agenda as to exactly what we're trying to achieve with young people in organizations such as those.
I don't really disagree with anyone on the panel. What I will say, what I will say is this. I truly believe it's the integration or the falling apart of the value system that existed way a long time ago, where I will listen to stories of parents who had to draw water from well and who had to go feed goat, and you had so many responsibilities and schoolwork to add on top of it. And what I have found observing is, as Shari said, but not in these exact words, parents of today cripple their children, and they cripple their children because you would hear people say, I don't want my child to go through what I went through when I was growing up, and that's absolutely nonsense. Because what you went through, the hardship, learning responsibility, learning that you have to work for everything and anything you would like, it's absolutely necessary for a child today to make it. When you have children that want everything and they want it now, and you have parents struggling. I heard Dr. Dawson talking about, well, if we had a parenting class, all parents won't be able to go because you have some parents with 2 and 3 jobs. Well, my view on that is live within your means. If you're a parent, and I don't intend to sound harsh, but if you're a parent and you have 2 or 3 children, all of them need your attention. You need to mold your children as well as the community, but yes, you're home. And if you find that you have to have 2 and 3 jobs, and the 2 and 3 jobs are not just to get the necessity, the basics of life, but the extra bits, then we have an issue with how we're actually thinking. It cannot be that you're working 3 jobs and you leave before your child gets to school and you come home when your child is already sleeping, or you're hoping they're sleeping, or you're too tired to check where they are. That's a problem. Don't tell me the 3rd job is, I want to ensure my child has the latest sneakers. Nonsense. If we have the value system back in place where we're looking at respect, manners, responsibility, hard work, those things that build a proper and decent person to be successful, I think things will change, and it will change for the positive, and it will change quicker if the community as a whole sees it as a problem and agree this is where we are, and this is what we need to do to go forward. It cannot be that some parents are going to change and other parents are not going to change, because children are influenced by other children. So I think, and I do agree, we ought to try to stop crippling our children and allow them to really see and face the hardships of life, and that things do not come easy.
Okay. Thank you.
You did ask.
I would like now to chase a rabbit that came up under this topic, because what you'll see tonight is that all of the topics basically are related, and we can't and shouldn't discuss them in isolation of each other, because whatever solution, I think at the end of the day, will be multifaceted in terms of how we approached it. One of the points that Paul was making earlier, he talked about parents or situations where mothers might have children by different fathers. Therefore, that one of the indications, or I should say one of the things that has changed as far as our community structure, is in terms of not having the traditional mother, father, and 13 children. We got away from that a long time now. So one of our topics here we talked about, that's on to discuss tonight, is about the new family structure, mother, daycare, and the government. The family structure has changed. We no longer have a child that's being raised by a two-parent household and supported by the surrounding community. Increasingly, today's children are being raised by a single parent who is holding down a full-time job and dependent on daycare and government programs to help establish normalcy for his or her child. How can parents exist in this new reality and successfully raise children who are positive contributors to society? So I open up the floor to tackle that at any angle that you like.
I firstly want to say that it is an interesting situation in terms of parenting and the responsibility of a parent, especially here in the BVI. I would say that children, especially from the perspective of a teacher, lack that adult supervision and the motivation from the parent. Simply because we understand that, yes, parents have 2 or 3 jobs, but like Miss Henley, said, what is the necessity behind of that, and how do we determine whether a parent is working really hard to make means meet, or are just trying to be erroneous in their giving their children more than what they really need? I would say that, in essence, where we have Christmas break, where children go home, they open an iPod and an iPad and the latest gadgets, and then come back to school and have no textbooks. What are we really saying then? We spend our money on what? And then the children lack in terms of education and motivation. I can say from experience, I was raised by my parents, grandparents, even my great-grandmother at the time, who passed at the age of 102. And for me, I think of that old wisdom. People always tell me that I have wisdom beyond my years somewhat, but I attribute that to that family system that we had. I used to boast when I was away to school that the BVI is very family oriented and we appreciate family, but I have students now who don't even know who their grandparents are, and for me that is quite mind-boggling. And then we lose that essence of family and that ideal of sticking to it and not just quitting. Today happens to be my grandparents' 73rd anniversary on my mom's side, the Rhymers, and we just had a little get-together for them. I rushed from there, and the values that Mama and Papa spoke of, for me, still resonate in my heart. How to stick together through amidst the uncertainty and amidst the trials and all of that. And they pass that on to us. So that inheritance of not just things and wealth and the land and all of that we so freely have in the BVI, but more so to pass on an inheritance of wisdom, wealth of knowledge and resources. How do I build character, and how do I define the essence of who I am and just go for my dream? So I believe that is where we have fallen short a lot. And if we are to get back to that family mentality, a lot of the children will have knowledge of self and will then be able to make smarter decisions and choices.
Before the next person comes on, I've been asked to allow the audience that we can start the interaction early. So if you would like to make a comment or raise a question on anything that's being said, you can raise your hand and we'll bring the mic around to you.
Let me just say that Mr. Castro has touched on several points that I agree with her. Family has changed because, you know, being a new dad, I've always have children around me because I love children. But being a father, it really opened up my eyes to how society view a man's role in the house, in the family. You're not expected to have that loving side as a man. You're supposed to be tough. And I think it's how we've been raised, you know what I mean, where boys are given dumper truck and water gun and girls are given dollies. And I think there's a problem there because when a male is not allowed to play his real role inside of family, not just as a provider financially, but a provider emotionally, there for his children, listening and everything, it hampers the whole thing. Now, the next thing that I see in our society is promiscuity. It is something that is glorified, and I believe that leads to a lot of children don't knowing their fathers, a lot of females being single mom, and then single mom is glorified in our community. It's not supposed to be like that. The children did not ask to come here. We went for them. So I think it takes two to tangle. And until we try to solve that problem, the family structure is going to forever be in problems. Now, when it comes on to good role for fathers, I had an experience the other day where merely pushing my son in the pram was a big thing. You know what I mean? Cars were stopping, blowing. And I was like, this is so not right. It's for fathers to spend time with their sons or daughter. It's normal. It is a normal thing. But our society has pushed in the males that we need to have 6 and 7 girlfriends and get all of them pregnant, and then the boys, our children, are watching this pattern. They're like, yo, I want to be a Don like Gadites because they have 4 girls, and that's not being a Don. We are misleading these youths. And as I said, whatever we do, these children, they're looking at us and they're going to say, yes, I want to be in. And it comes back, even, I agree with the doctor, some of these programs on television, they are definitely misleading, and I would think she's getting off some of them.
Okay. In my view, we have to be totally honest on this topic. This topic is actually headed new family structure, right? Mm-hmm. And they're talking about single parents and the daycare and the government and all these things. But if we're going to be completely honest, I just think we're in a different time, but nothing is that different from what happened before. What is the big difference? It's a big difference that before you were obligated to get married to have children, but were all the children in that union of the same parents? So in my view, these are not new issues. It's just how we deal with it. Hence, I'm going to be on value system all night. Once you have a good value system, it doesn't matter, in my view, if you're living with daddy, mommy, stepdaddy, granny, brother, sister, not sure, cousin, etc., etc. If the good values are being instilled, you could still be a good product of the community. We all have to agree. You have children that come from very, very negative backgrounds, and you will get stark different children in the end. You will get someone that, yes, may be diverted and went on drugs, but you may also get a president. And they came from the same bad background. So I think at the end of the day, it really, really boils down to that good value being instilled from very young, and not so much, I'm not saying that unions are not good, but I am saying that you can work with what you have and still get decent, good youths to turn into good men and women in this society, rather than, I don't like how you say women having 3 and 4 baby daddies and don't know who the father is. Sorry, but if you really listen to stories of old, there were many children born into marriages, and trust me, nobody know who they're for.
The reason, may I
But they still turn out to be okay in the society, because once you came from a family with good values, you will be okay. You'll be able to make decent choices. If my choice is to have 4 fathers, then that's a choice I made out of my own because I came from good values, but not my choice to make, yes? But I'm just saying, I mean, it shouldn't be too much bashing on this new family structure, but rather what is actually being done within the family structure.
I don't think that was a choice. A female having 4 different male, with children with those male is not a choice. Economically, sometimes we're facing a situation. Let me explain. There's several protection methods out there. Carelessness is not a choice. Carelessness is not a choice. It's something that you do knowingly. You'll have to suffer the consequence. And the problem with our community is that when some of these children are in a household that does not have a father figure, and sometimes a stepdad is not a good father figure. If we're going to be real about the issue, people, let us be real about it. I may love my son, but I may not love the next man's child as though I love my son. No, that child is suffering. Why should that child suffer?
I fail to
Wait,
understand.
hold 1 second. I hear a lot of interaction, so I want some hands in the audience. Okay. Let's get the mic to them and get some input or feedback.
Good night, everyone. I came here as a journalist, but these kind of topics attract me a lot. I'm hearing all sorts of talks about what our parents used to do when they were growing up and their values back then. The Antarctic is not the same form it is now that it used to be then. I say that to say, we as parents have to start adapting to the changes that are now, use the devices that we have available now to instill the values that can work with our children. Our children are not going to go back to the olden days. Right. Because we're not paddling with steamboats. We're moving with engines.
We had one here, Charles. Right here.
Right here?
Yeah.
You'll have to get up.
Which one? Immigration.
No, it's not going to reach.
No, I don't want to be honest. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't even know where to start.
Start somewhere.
I'll start by saying I am very much in agreement with Indra, Jude, about value systems. And I beg to differ with Mr. Gadites about choice. A lady, a woman who has, regardless of how many partners, it's a choice. It's a choice. There is no getting away from it. She chooses whether or not to use contraception, whether to have more than one choice. That is a choice. It is no mistake about it. It is true that sometimes they're careless, but it's still a choice. Because when you get one pregnancy, you know how it happens, and you know what to do to prevent another one. If you don't, then it's a choice. And to me, a very conscious choice. My grandmother had a saying, she used to say, help and whelp. You'd start out looking for help, and you end up with all the other things but help. But it still boils down to choice. And I do agree that values mean a whole lot more than what we see. I believe one of the things we touched on but we have not said is role modeling. Children definitely learn by from their parents, a lot more of what you do than what you see. And I think the bottom line is still, as a community, we have to be responsible for all the children and all persons. We have to respect persons' rights, and we have to respect choice. And that also brings me back to the thing about television. I don't think that's a government issue. I think that's a parental issue. And I think we need to stop expecting the government to do what parents are supposed to do. Parents have to be responsible for their children. Whether they have one or whether they have 20, they have to be responsible. Sorry? They're not supposed to be out working if they have 20 children. And if they do go out to work, then they have to put things in place to do the things that they need to do. I've had to work as a parent personally, and I've had to employ somebody to come and be there with the children or find a grandmother or somebody to stay with them. But the responsibility is for you to choose appropriate persons. You can't just leave your children anywhere and with anybody and not think about the consequences. So when I decided to go back to school, yes, I went to labor and I got somebody employed, and I had a very hard time from labor because they tried to convince me that to have somebody in my house for 4 hours was not feasible. I must have somebody in my house for 8 hours. And I argued with them that I didn't need anybody in my house while nobody was at home. I only needed the person there for the few hours when I was at class. But parents have to be responsible, and they have to stop and think before they get pregnant whether they can afford to have one child or whether they can afford to have 5 or 6 or however many they decide to have. But I think
Okay, we have a response up here.
I think she touched on it. I'm an English teacher by profession, so it's hard. I just want to say, Gala, it's a choice is a right and a responsibility. You have power to do so. You choose to not use contraceptive. You choose your partner. You choose to walk. You choose to leave your kids at home. And I think what we are failing to realize as a community is that because we because parents, as a teacher sometimes I do feel like a parent, but as parents, because you choose to work extra hours, the consequence, the children didn't choose for you to do that. The consequence then is that we have children now taking on adult responsibility, specifically raising their younger siblings, which they are not equipped to do because they themselves are still learning and still growing up. But they are left to tend to the children, help them with homework when they themselves have homework, cook the dinner, and do these host of things. And so they become parents in themselves. Hence, I will continue to return to the school setting. When we come in and we speak to them, we're speaking to an adult, because then they tell us, well, this is what I do. And they do have adult responsibility. So how do we draw the line between responsibility of child and responsibility of parent? And then in so doing, understand that parents must know that the choices that they make do not only affect them, but their children. And then the children then have to kind of brace themselves and just figure it out on their own and just make means meet. So then we have this conundrum of trying to decide as young people, because I've heard it from them, well, what is my role? Am I to learn? Am I to do these childlike things, or am I supposed to be a parent? So parents, I would like to see what your thought is on that and help us to consider what can be done to take away that parental responsibility from children so that they can just plain out be children.
Dr. Dawson?
I totally agree with you, Shari. And I agree with those who talked about parents who doing the extra jobs to make sure you have the latest phone and so on. But I think that, I don't know if in the BVI, if we understand the people that are living here enough. If we understand that that person who's working the 2 jobs, at the end of the day, it's $8 an hour, $4. Like when they work in that 2 job, it's $4 an hour job, and you're gone all together for 12 hours. 12 fours are $48 for the day in the British Virgin Islands. And if you, for whatever reason, and guys, I would say, I don't know if to say it's a choice, but I would say I don't think it was a plan.
No.
That no person at the time when they hadn't had the first child yet said, you know what, I want 4 children and I want them by 4 different persons. It may not have been a choice. It may have been a choice, but I don't think it was a plan. But they ended up there. So when we think of the reality that some of these things that we're talking about as solutions, well, don't do the other job, that's not a choice for a lot of people in our community, more than we choose to think. That's not a choice. Those persons have to work in order to eat and in order for their children to eat. So, what are we going to do? In my view, and perhaps I was heavy-handed with the government as to what we should do, but guess what? I believe that it goes back to the same thing that we mentioned earlier about a village to raise a child. But when we talk about a village now, the village now is a collective responsibility. And what's the collective responsibility and how does that look in this day and age? It looks in the form of churches. It looks in the form of other organizations, maybe even island associations. It looks in the form of government itself as a collective acting on our behalf. And it seems to me that those type of organizations, it's not enough for me to raise my own child. It's not enough. When I had a son, my stepson was a certain age, there was a gang of boys used to be in my yard. And I didn't want to chase them out. I tried to help them out when I could. Some of them come and they do their homework there and so on. Because guess what? It's not enough for me to raise my own child. If I want my own child in a particular environment, it's not enough because the parents that are out there aren't necessarily trying to raise their children in a particular way. So we now have to say, so the churches, when the school closes at 3:30, the churches have to open their doors because there are children who are going to go home, as you said, as a 12-year-old, go up by someplace, pick up a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old and raise them up than themselves. I'm saying that these places, whether they're your members or not, organizations like churches, we have to open our doors and guess what? We're better positioned to do so. Because unlike, say, 40, 50 years ago, I would say, especially when it comes to school work, the people who are retired now in the BVI, you have people with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, all sorts of degrees. You have people, it's a different age. You have very competent people who are retired in the British Virgin Islands and who can provide support to those individuals, those young people. But we must not see it that I have to do it for my grandchildren. That if we are going to survive in this place together as one and have a community which we all can live in and be comfortable, it can't be just you looking out for your own. We have to be involved in systems where we are planning to help to raise the child of that neighbor who you know is not at home to help raise their own child.
I tried real hard not to have a comment. But I'm feeling my age this week, and I think y'all need to learn. Our society today has lost its moral values. All of you are saying it. But one of the reality is that children have become a byproduct of relationships, and so they are almost inconsequential. And people are not being together and raising children, and they expect their children to produce a good product when they start out as a byproduct. It's almost impossible. Yes, there are single people with children where it's not a byproduct, but there are too many children in our society that are byproducts. My niece here is an English teacher. We even have new words now. I cannot get over it. Child mother and child father. I mean, we accept it to an extent that perpetuates the problem. And we need to face up to that fact. The fact that we do that, we are essentially devaluing our own sons and daughters. Because when your sons and daughters hear you with that language, that's what they'll aspire to be. Our young people should not even learn those terms. It's simple. You have to stop having children be a byproduct of relationships and get back to basic values. I have 2 grown men as sons, and they often tell me that I have wonderful children. They tell me. But it's because of hard work. You know, you talk about parents that don't
spend time with their children. They're busy earning money for fancy sneakers and hairdressing for the young girls, which they don't need. They need their parents in their lives. Raising children, there was many a day that I was late for work. But I didn't go to work unless I had breakfast with my children. Because if you don't create a medium to develop a communication skill with your child every day, you'll never know about their problems. Never. Because they don't know how to talk to you. So it's not as I had a situation with my older son once where I don't remember what happened, but I said to him, this parenting thing is a job. And that's what it is. He was a fresh little boy. He said, Mommy, if it's a job, you're fired. But that's what it is. And too many times people don't realize it. Why are you going to have 4 and 5 children in today's society? Who can afford that? You know, the more you give them, the more they're going to want. So people have to start thinking with their head and stop having children be a byproduct of their relationships.
Mm-hmm. Good evening. Just to agree with my aunt, I understand that, parents instill certain values. Indra said that. And to agree with Mr. Dawson with the government. But I feel as the community, and you involve the church also, when do we put our foot down and say we have to raise the standards for parents? Because children have consequences. I feel parents should have consequences too. If you can't afford to feed a child, and I have seen it, maybe you shouldn't have a child. I know in America they have this thing called child services. Well, not exactly welfare, but if you can't provide, I'm not saying take away someone's child, but you have to have standards and certain laws that will say, okay, social development goes here, we check every school, this child we're making sure that these certain amount of students are fed, this and that. If you have a problem, you can make certain reports. I feel a lot of things are overlooked, and you can't really enforce on kids. It's parents, and that's where you have to really start there, because if you're a good parent and you look over a whole community, I'm not going to take care of my child and be like, I'll send him my brother Dawson going to feed him. Because what's my consequence for a starving child? I'm in a community where he's going to get fed. So I feel community, government, they all have to come together and not just sweep it under the rug by saying, well, let's do this, let's do that, but enforce certain things that they have to raise the bar. Until then, it's just going to be the same.
Thank you. Okay, we have another audience. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good night.
Good
My
night.
name is Shamoya
Good night,
Madiru.
good night.
I'm an interactor and I've been listening. And the problem I see is that children are getting children in this day and age. And the problem with their growing up, they don't want other people speaking to their children. Basically, they will not like other persons to correct them. So there where you're saying that community have to raise a child in this day and age, other persons don't want people speaking to their children. So where that worked in the past, it's not going to work now, because I may get a child and say, I don't want you have nothing to say to my child because you don't know what you're saying. And this is the mentality that they have, because now that the children are getting children, they don't know how to raise a child. And even though you may provide these parenting classes, how many of them will attend? How many of them will find the time to come, to be there, to attend? And also, Dr. Dawson said about church youth activities. School closed at 3:30, the church needs to open the door. I am also a part of the Roadtown Girls Brigade. We're an international fellowship group. And basically we have Girls Brigade and Boys Brigade, which is open to both girls and boys. And the membership of the group has dropped tremendously, where you have 3 girls coming, 4 brigaders, which will be my age. we have 3 girls coming from the high school. They are not interested in this because they find it to be a church activity. They don't want to be a part of it. They find it shame to have to walk from school to go to the church on Thursdays or Fridays or whenever we have the meetings. That's how they feel about it in this day and age, honestly. And if they're not going to that, they are still opening the doors for them to come. The Boys Brigade have little to no members now. How many of them go to youths on a Friday night? How many of them are in the church choir? When you look at that, their parents are not encouraging them to go. Even though their parents may be children, but you still have other older parents who are not saying, hey, get up, it's Friday night, go to youths. Hey, it's this day, go to church, go to the choir. Learn, do something out of your time. They're just keeping them home, stay on Facebook, stay on Instagram, stay on Twitter. You know, they're not encouraging their children to go out and join these activities. I've been in many activities. I'm a member of Girls Brigade. I'm a member Interact. I'm the president of the HLSCC Women of Power and High Potential. I involve myself in a lot of activities, and a lot of persons like, okay, let me draw an example. We're just starting back this semester at the college, and all of my girls from the club left. They graduated. I have 3 girls left, and I had 40 girls show interest and on orientation. Now coming out to sending text to them. Oh, we can have meeting Friday at 5 o'clock. And then like, we can have meeting at this time. And they like, finally we get out of high school. Fridays off, only free day now. Why do you want to take it away from us? I say I can't do anything to allow you to meet during the week because everybody don't have the same free time. And if you look around, all the groups on the campus meet on Fridays, and there's like, well, then I don't think I can make it. I just rather stay home. And that's the mentality they have. They don't want to come out. They just rather stay home. They just rather not be a part of. They rather not learn. That's basically it.
Thank you. I have several responses up here at the panel, so we're going to go through them one by one. Okay, so I have several points of clarification because I also have a point of clarification from Paul, and Sherry also wants to share a thought that she had. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and thanks very much. I really thought those were really insightful comments. I would say, though, that as far as the churches, when I talk about opening the church doors, that the churches might actually have to be willing to release their product. That is to say, when you open a church door, I'm not talking about opening it for youth fellowship or Girls Brigade or Boys Brigade. You're opening it up as a space where young people can come. Maybe they can get a snack to eat. They could get assistance with their homework. Not necessarily that this is the occasion or place or space where we are trying to lead you into a particular spiritual experience. Now, I'm saying that, and I'm a lay preacher in the Methodist Church. Let me make it plain as to what my goals and aims are. But I'm saying that as far as making that space, our church, as an open space that is a little bit more welcoming to all comers, that it may have to be that we're going to have to put a part of our agenda on the back burner first in order to get people in.
All right, Sherry, you want to go first, and then Paul, I'll let you get on.
I want to say that we keep speaking about the responsibility of churches and government and this and that, but my simple thought is this: how do you communicate if there's division? We see division among churches. We see division. Churches can't even, they won't visit other churches or open correspondence with them. We have political leaders who can't even have a conversation with each other. We are segmented in terms of island, where we have I from gut, I from east, I from west, and we have all this division, and we're somehow saying, well, the community raises the child, and we need to get back to that, and we need to understand the relevance of that. But with so much division, how do we understand the responsibility to come together? And we can't just say, okay, which I do agree that the church can play a vital role. However, let's say one church begins doing that. Let's be real, we're in Tortola. Oh, look at that church, what they're doing. And we begin to criticize when people even begin to open a door of opportunity. Whereas if we stop being children, I would say, in a lot of areas where we cannot even reach the point where we can't even converse on certain issues because of different affiliations, then we have a huge problem. And I believe that that is one of the major causes of delinquency, period, in any system, in any institution, because we are no longer able to communicate with each other because of different preferences, views, and anything of the sort.
I just want to clarify something, you know, I mean, when I used the word choices a while ago, and yes, I use that word choices, and you know, I must tell you that as I also use the word promiscuity, very promiscuous, you know, society have embraced that behavior, and several young girls, you'll hear them talk that they want an older man because schoolboy lunch money can't work. And as that lady over there said, that we need to be realistic with our children. We need to be real with our children. If we're really gonna solve these problems, we need to be real with them. The other thing is that, you know, there's a thing in our society where single parents are glorified. And I think we have gone off track right there. So we've gone way off track. And the children are the one that are suffering, because when I can go around and brag that, boy, my mommy grew me, it's like a badge of honor. But for who? Who does that? Who wears that badge of honor? Surely not the mother, and surely not the child, because that child has lost a lot of things that could have made that person much, much better. But I think the problem really lies with our great grandparents went through a struggle for us to be here. There was a reason why we had to look out for each other, because it was very important to look out for our children, because we had a common adversary. Now we have grown, and we've been more, you know what I mean, social is what we're saying it, but we are really divided, as Mr. Castro say, in several elements, and we have to solve that, come back to the basic, and make our children our priorities.
Take a break. Continue with
I would like to say something quickly, where you just said that women would like to have more than one, would like older men. I would like to clarify on that, because I feel now, what if the older men want younger girls because they can take advantage of them? They go to the younger girls, and then they play around with their mind, and oh, I could get you this, and I could do this, and I could carry you places. How about you look at it in that direction, saying the older men are troubling the younger girls rather than the younger girls looking for older men?
I believe it comes back to your value, as a panel is saying. It comes back to your value. If your mother or the person within your household grew you in a sense where, as we've been saying, working hard for things and earning things is the best policy. If you just want things and you feel like an older man can provide it by being with him, I can't.
But then now you're saying that they grow, they are taught on what to do properly. But then again, we're more dealing with youths at the beginning and what caused conflict and what's not between the youths.
Mm-hmm.
Now if that youth is peer pressure, she know the moral values of life, she know how to do. But then again, she still have this one bad friend and say, oh, you could do this and your parents wouldn't have to know. And then that child turn rebellious. The child rebel and then goes out and do all kinds of different things. Then you can't blame it on the home, you can't blame it on the parents. Is that it's peer pressure. It's out there today. Everybody are being peer pressured into doing this. Oh, just come here and just smoke this and just come here and do that. They are being peer pressured. I wouldn't basically put all the blame on the parents, but then again, there are still youths out there are pressuring other youths into doing things they would not like to do, what they know are wrong.
Hold on. That's actually one of the topics that we're going to get into. I want to thank everyone for their contributions thus far. It's been really interactive, which is what we need in terms of starting to go through what the issues are, bypass some of the symptoms, I think, and get to what the roots of the matter is. And as far as the discussion so far, where we've talked about, what really is the problem, and I hope that we're all thinking about in terms of, when we leave here, what can I do in my space, and from there on an organizational level, and then as a societal level, because it is something that I think we were talking on the break, as far as we've been excusing the problem for a lot longer than we should have, understanding that this is not a new issue, which I think is a very important point that we have to bear in mind. Single parents is not a new phenomenon, because you had cases where the fathers were gone for months at a time because they were out providing for the family, but you had that family support in terms of extended family in the community, or even persons who aren't even family members, but they took their role in their society seriously, as far as being good role models, modeling good values is one of those things. So even if you do have negative influences, because we just ended at the break in terms of talking about peer pressure, and I don't think anybody in this room has not encountered peer pressure at any age. It's not even just a youth problem, but it is something where if you have a value system, good or bad, those are the things that guide your choices, and you will always have to make those choices according to what you believe. So one of the final topic that we're going to touch on tonight is titled the Education Conundrum. And we have two educators with us here tonight, and I believe this will also continue to enhance our discussion. Employers complain about the quality of students that the education system produces. Teachers complain about parents' lack of involvement in their children's education. Parents complain of an education system that is uncaring and irrelevant. Most concede that our fragmented education system, with elements of British, American, and Caribbean influences, appears to be failing to adequately prepare youths for the reality of the workplace or even tertiary education. Let's discuss. Should I start with the educator?
The seasoned educator.
The veteran on our panel. What are your thoughts, Dr. Dawson?
My thought is that if you don't know where you're going, then for one thing, you'll never know if you get there, and then as you said, any road you can try. I don't know that, and I think efforts are being made, but in terms of being very, very clear about the standards in a curriculum at the preschool level, at the primary school level, at the high school level, at the college level, as one seamless system, so that wherever one level ends off, the other level picks up, and it's very clear that you're measuring along the way to see where we have reached as far as those are concerned. If we are not absolutely clear, because if we are clear on one end and the other pieces along the way have gaps, then we certainly will not be able to make it. So it sounds simple, but essentially that's what it's about. It's about establishing what it is, where it is that you want to go, and what are our strategies that are going to get us there. Now, there are a lot of things along the way that you could say little pet peeves for me that I think can enhance things. I think that one of the things that affects our education system here in the BVI is leadership, and I don't think that we do enough of a job as far as preparation of principals. The whole arena of principal preparation is something that has been recognized, that there are certain skills that principals must bring in order to run effective schools. We instead, oftentimes, you go, somebody's a good teacher, they're apparent to have leadership skills, principalship opens up, and you say, well, this is a good guy, Ed is a good guy, or teacher Kai is a good guy, let's make him a department head, and then let's make him a deputy principal, and then let's make him a principal, without saying, that there is a body of knowledge associated with effectiveness in that role. And I think that's one. There are many things to look at, but I'd say, Shane, that's one thing that I would love to see addressed, to see that the leadership in the schools must be adequately prepared in order to be effective.
I want to respond firstly to Dr. Dawson's comment about principals and whether they are equipped to do the job. I believe that in the BVI we have a system where you are promoted based on years of experience and not so much education. and the possibilities that exist, whereby the younger generation are able to go out and seek out education at this point, and therefore have a level of understanding and knowledge of a particular field in a new way, in an innovative way that is in sync with the century that we are in, versus continuing with experience. And the difficulty that we face as young people coming in with these brand new ideas and concepts, haven't learned it, because then you would have to send back these same people in for training or different, go away to schooling. But then we come in with this fresh insight and all of this, and then we are somehow muzzled and say, well, you only have 1 year of experience, but I went to school and I have this level of understanding that enables me, with your help and supervision, to get the job done as well. Not on my own, of course, but with the partnership of you, the seasoned veteran in the profession. So I think we have a definite divide in the community in terms of that experience versus education, and we seriously need to fix it. So that's in response to your comment. I didn't want to say that I don't believe that we could fix the system, the problem that's plaguing the system, with the same level of thinking or people that created them. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of the situation. We expect to we expect to put a band-aid on a lot of issues concerning education. Let's be real, our kids cannot function in the workforce because, one, they cannot read, and two, they cannot write. They use their dialect more than anything else, hence they are unable to communicate. Communication is one of the major characteristics that one needs in order to be employed in the first place. And because we have failed our children in that way, in terms of accountability, where we have social promotion, we have grade inflation, we have all these different things that enable them to continue doing what they're doing, and then we turn around and blame them when we chose to allow them to graduate in the first place, having failed the required subjects or whatever was mandatory of them. That's one of my major issues. So, for instance, and this is not to throw slugs, but this is just to show that I believe we are viewing things from the wrong perspective. How do you change, for instance, and again, this is not throwing slugs, but how do you change the grading system in a school and not change the means by which we teach to then enable the children to make grades? We teach with blackboards and we don't allow technology to enhance the learning, where the kids no longer want to learn in black and white, but we still have that in the classroom. Currently speaking, I can see it myself, and so the kids can't learn. There's this block where we try to do what we can with what we have, but when there are resources available, they are not necessarily being dispersed in the right way. So not to throw slugs, but we use technology to basically with the cameras and all that, in terms of the police, we're trying to stop crime. But in order to stop crime, we have to get technology in the classroom first to get the attention of the children, so that they could not want to break into somebody's house, but want to get the necessary skills necessary to build their own house. So that's some of my major issues. I'm an educator and I could say a whole lot more, but I will pass the mic on.
No, I'll let you do. All right. As far as educating our children, I agree with several points that Miss De Castro made. We are still in a stone age when it comes down to education, and our children, they are very tech savvy. They know about technology and everything, but when you go into a classroom in 2013 and don't see no technology, it defeats the whole purpose of teaching these children. And as far as in the workplace, when you go and see children getting a summer job and learning the practical different from the theoretical, because no matter how much you go to college and you get all these theoretical things together, when you leave that institution and go into the practical workplace. You have to know what you're doing. Books can't help you in all of that. You'll have to know it. So I believe that right now the educational system needs to be revamped. It needs to be looked at fully, not just partially, as what Mr. Castor said, to grading alone, but the subject matter. We need to really do that. So that's my point.
I thought that this question was structured in a very interesting manner. I'm not sure if you all catch. I'm not saying that you are not bright and following, at all. But before the issue of education actually was focused on in the question, there was a blaming cycle where you have the employers blaming the system, then you have the teachers blaming parents, and parents blaming back the system. Now, my view on this whole topic, because I'm not in education, so I can't speak too much about it. I don't want to speak out of arrogance or ignorance. But what I will say is this: even if, with all the beautiful views from the left side of me on this panel, even if these things were implemented in the education system, we still would fail, and the cries of the stakeholders will still exist. Because the stakeholders, as far as I could see, which I've identified from the question, would be you have employers, teachers, parents, the education department, and you have students. These are the main 5 stakeholders in relation to this particular issue. And if one of these stakeholders do not do their job, trust me, everybody will still cry. So it's not just a matter of fixing the education system per se. It's like the topic of the hospital is hot. If the hospital was fully built and equipped, has all the equipment needed to do heart surgery, any illness that walk in, we have it to deal with it, but you don't have the manning, you don't have the management, you don't have anything to fill this perfect system, it's still a failure. So I still say that even though, yes, we can pinpoint issues within the education department, we still also have to look at the issues in relation to employers, maybe wanting to train and not, turn up a blind eye, maybe. You want to look at teachers, because not all teachers are bad. Some teachers do actually genuinely care for students, but they can't do it alone. But then there are those who don't care. You also have to look at parents who, I do see some parents, not all, leave it for the system to rear the kids. And you also have to look at the department who has to make the necessary implementations, and the students. They too have a part to play, because if everybody is doing their part and the student decided, I don't care what you say or what you give me to do, I'm not doing it, still cries from all parties. So I think that's my take on this particular question here.
Interesting. Okay.
I want to say that I believe that the focus, I do agree with what you're saying, but I believe that the focus at the end of the day is placed on the youth and the children, because they then have to deal with the consequences of all parties, whether it's government, parents, community. The children at the end of the day have to kind of figure it out on their own. In so doing, if we could, I can only speak from the vantage point of a teacher, but if we as teachers are able to attract via innovative ways such as new literacies, and that's technology and all of that, we're not saying that the kids won't abuse them. They will in some instances, but all of that has to do with classroom management and things of the sort. But where do you place the accountability? Not just on government, but community organizations. And one of my biggest pet peeves is that we have had premiers, ministers, doctors, lawyers, and the list goes on, of people who have passed through whether BVI High School, ESHS, whatever it was called in the past, and they have failed to come back and contribute in whatever way. They do not have to put their hand in their pockets, but they can outstretch their hands and just pop into the classroom. You don't have to hand out a projector, hand out a pencil, hand out some words, telling them, listen, I was where you were, and you can be somebody. They hear it from us all the time. Let's be real. Teachers, parents, children see us more than parents or anybody else. We spend the most time with them in school. And if we, I believe, are given the responsibility and held accountable based on that responsibility, because we cannot expect to have effective students if we do not have effective teachers, and all of that boils down to the hiring of teachers, and the list goes on. So I just want to understand where the accountability lies in reference to the whole thing, because I believe that that's what introduces the problems in the first place.
Okay. Any thoughts from the audience? I heard a yes. Okay.
I actually have a slightly different take on it, but to sort of clarify where I'm coming from, I want to ask a couple of questions of Ms. De Castro first. What's your average class size that you have?
The average class size would be, let's say, between 25 plus, generally speaking, and therein lies a problem.
And how many classes per day of 25 kids do you see?
I can speak of myself. I have 17 hours a week. So I have 4 classes in one given day, sometimes 3, but mostly 4.
What's underlying that question for me is that one of the things that really helped me in high school, not in terms of raising me or anything, but just in terms of feeling comfortable with the material, being able to perform at my best, was I was able to have a relatively personal interaction and relationship with my teachers. And one of the things I realized being here in the BVI is that you have, maybe 13 plus primary schools feeding into 2 high schools. To me, having come from an environment where there's maybe double the population, but quite a number more high schools, for me, the experience of going from primary school to high school wasn't too traumatic, because I was still in a relatively small class in terms of your homeroom. And we still were able in our elective subjects and so on to have relatively small classes and have a lot of interaction with our teachers in the classroom, and sometimes even after class, because they may have a free period, you can go ask them questions and so on. And I guess I sort of thought that a population of around 25,000, is that kind of right, would have more high schools, just sort of a smaller context in which to learn. I know the comment about sort of American system, British system is very interesting too, because I know Americans have huge high schools, generally speaking, and sometimes in a lecture class you might have like 100 kids. And I just don't understand that for high school, which is a very formative time in any child's life. I mean, it was major for me. And I want to add an example to that, because I had a friend of mine who went from high school in St. Kitts to university in the US, and went into a university that was 30,000 people. And her first year was just spent recovering from culture shock, right? So I kind of think when you come from a primary school that is relatively small, you have a relatively personal interaction, and then you jump into this huge high school, it's got to take a while to get your feet back under you, no matter what you say. So that's just my opinion, and I'd like to get your sort of feedback on this, is that smaller high schools, especially in a small community, even community high schools, would probably serve kids a little bit better, potentially.
I want to ask a question based on your comment. What would you say, and this is the reality of the situation, what would you say if I believe that the focus and the perspective is on the wrong thing? We are currently facing a situation where the high school is perceived to be overstaffed, but not overpopulated. Overstaffed, now in terms of budget, of course, but not overpopulated.
What's the population of the high school?
Thousands, I can't even pinpoint, but we are overstaffed and not overpopulated. The fact that I have 25 students in a class, in any given class, I am one teacher, and we face an issue economically where we're saying that we do not have the funds necessary to pay our teachers, generally speaking, but we are allowing more and more students to come into the school to become products of the system, I am confused. So you say that, you speak about the smaller classroom sizes, which I agree with, but in order to have smaller class sizes, you have to have more teachers. In order to have more teachers, you have to have a bigger budget for education. In order for that to happen, the powers that be must see that.
I would even take it a step further. I just think you need smaller high schools.
Well, that's an economic issue as
Altogether.
well in terms of building the schools and
Yeah, it's an investment issue. It's an investment in education issue.
I agree.
And it's a matter of what, not everyone might agree with my perspective. Some people might think a big high school where you conserve money by pooling your resources and educating more kids at a time is perfectly fine. From my perspective, I would not have done well in that kind of system. So from my perspective, I think smaller high schools and a greater investment. And it is an investment. It's a lot of money. Even if you have to rotate teachers from school to school or something. I just think when your kid comes from a small community and goes into a bigger environment, there's a period of adjustment that has to be accounted for. So, and I personally think the investment would be worth it. Even 3 high schools in Tortola. But it all depends on what factors you're looking at in making that decision and what. I'm just going anecdotally. I'm not going from any studies or evidence, right? But I think if the will was there to look at it in that way and say what might be better, I'm sure you could find studies and evidence that would support the idea of smaller high schools for a small community.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
I think the whole education thing is full of ignorance. I do not want to be disrespectful to any educators, but I think sometimes the parents can be ignorant to their children learning. I think that some teachers can be ignorant towards some children learning. Yes, everybody say that technology will help to further children learning, but sometimes back to the basic can also help us to learn. Not everything that glitters is gold. Not technology sometimes can mess us up. Some teachers teach for the money. Some teachers do not teach for the enjoyment, and I think that sometimes that can reflect in some children's academic work. I'm not saying that all teachers do not like teaching, but some just generally come just for the paycheck and that's it. Parents cannot allow teachers to grow their children up. Yes, sometimes some parents can be not financially stable and they cannot provide for their child, but sometimes a child is supposed to know what they want for themselves as well. We cannot allow ourselves to be like, oh my God, my home is this and that. We have to look for the light in our darkness. We cannot say, oh, because my mother ain't working, my father isn't working, I can stay on this, I can go out and thief and XYZ. I have to look for the light. I want to look better. I want to be better. I want to get out of my darkness. I have to look forward for something. I have to work for it. So education in itself can be ignorance to all because of the whole society and XYZ. Thanks.
Okay, it's me again. I'm sure you're tired of hearing or seeing me, but just one quick point to pick up where Tamara left off. I will just draw a quick example. I won't call any names, what's not. But down to my finals years in high school, I was in the second highest English class. Our entire class had a problem, and we complained, and then the head of the English said that, oh, you're just complaining because you hear stories about this teacher and everybody don't like this teacher, X, Y, and Z. I didn't know the teacher. It was my first time meeting her. And it was like, oh, you're just doing this because you heard this about this teacher and you don't want to be in their class. And they ignored us for the whole of that year. And then we moved on. We got a different teacher. But then most of the class ended up having to do supplementary. After we complained, I basically failed the class one of the terms. I was in the second highest English class, failing. And as we complained, they wouldn't study us. They had us done, most of us, to do supplementary. When they reviewed our work, we didn't have to do supplementary, basically. So that's just showing that they're not studying us. They're just there. They're just taking the teacher's word for it. They're not studying us. They're not studying the students. And what's not. So that's just basically what I had to say, just to draw example to bring Tamara's point together.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. We need to start to wrap up. So I'm going to give each panelist 30 seconds to make. Oh, doctor came back. Okay, good. You get away. So we're going to do 30 seconds. Each person give their closing thoughts and how we move forward. Start with you, doctor.
Thank you very much, and again, thanks to the club for having me here. And without, taking over the responsibility of the parents, I do believe that the reality is what it is, and to just preach on the quote-unquote bad parents, if you will, and expect them to turn around, I don't think that that's what we've been trying to do. I think that we have to take collective responsibilities within various organizations, within citizens, and as individuals to try to make that impact, as we've said, to change the value system of the individuals so that they, in turn, can be grounded in values that they can pass on to their children when they go on.
I would like to say that I believe that forums and opportunities such as this bridge the gap for a lot of people within the community, because I believe that a lot of the problems that we face are because of lack of awareness. People do not know the problem is happening, so there is no need for a solution. And because we are able to have a report about these issues that are plaguing our young people, we can then continue to initiate the conversation and allow for solutions to be forthcoming as a result of that. I would generally say that as a young person myself, I encourage the older generation in terms of parents and beyond to be a lot more transparent and a part of the raising of your child, but not just your child, but their friends and family and all that as well. Back when we had that unity and that togetherness, one of my fellow panelists said that the reality is that it's not so much that we're in the 24th century and these things happened centuries ago. It's that reality of carrying on that legacy, because what happened in the past has contributed to what is happening now. And unless the older people take responsibility for having been silent on a lot of issues, it will, and begin to bridge that gap of communication, we will continue to have this reoccurring cycle and conversation on issues such as this. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to furthering conversations on topics such as these.
Thank you.
Marvelous. I just want to say that it was such a pleasure to be among great minds like these. It was a pleasure with this panel, and I will forever remember it. And I also want to thank the Rotary again and my boss, Mr. Rodney Herbert, for pushing me this afternoon to say, Gadites, go with that opportunity. We focus on the youth, because as Whitney Houston said, I believe the children are the future. If we teach them well and let them lead the way, we'll have a much brighter future. First and foremost, we as a community need to look out for children, because we don't need to wait until they reach in front of the judge, or they're arrested by the police, or they're by the prison. We said we could have done it. We need to do it. I believe that we are in a time right now where we're losing out as far as the next generation goes, because we are, as Mr. Castro say, we're letting them down by not being honest with them and letting them know that the past years, some mistake were done to you, and we are going to be there to help you to overcome these struggles and challenges that you're facing. We leave here tonight with a big question, all of us. what can we do to make it better? No matter how small it is, it will make a difference. If you see someone child on the road or in a company that you figure more or less that they shouldn't be there, be bold enough. A lot of people may not like your boldness as to saying something, but don't wait until it's too late before we say something. We need to say and do things, take action now, because the future is with our children, and if we don't take them in hand right now, the future is very dark. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be very, very short. I am very, very happy that I did come to this discussion panel, although I was doubting it earlier. But what I do hope is this, because I think at the end of the day, listening to the persons that did have the courage to step to the mic and the panelists, I think across the board, everybody really do care about the youth. I'm hoping that we don't keep the discussions that we had here to ourselves. Rather, we should educate those outside, because in my view, it wouldn't work if we all don't see it as a common goal. If the country does not see it as a problem, then the country does not see that there's any need to fix anything. So I think we should leave here with knowledge, I'm sure leaving with some, and impart it on those who may be ignorant to that. And I'm hopeful that in the next 10 years, we should be better off than we are now. But thank you for having me.
All right. Give our panelists a round of applause. I would like to thank our hospitable venue, the Moorings and their staff, for taking care of us tonight, and the excellent food and dessert. I didn't have much food, but the banana bread was on. So again, just to thank everyone who participated, who attended, thanking the Rotary Club, President Charles, for having us, and to charge us, not just remind us, but to charge all of us here tonight to take, as Indra said, to go forward and make that difference that we want to see, be the change that we want to see. And if it means that we have to take it to the highest levels, then we do that. But we understand that we're all stakeholders in a part of our system or our community, and we all have a role to play, and basically we need to just take up those roles and run with them. Thank you for allowing me again to be your moderator this evening, and good night.
Okay, well, that was a fairly stimulating 2 hours or so. I think everybody will have got something out of that. It was a fascinating discussion, and we are not going to leave it to rest there. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some sort of script from what was discussed. And as you know, the Rotary Club of Roadtown has focused, it's one of our major focuses on youth. We have sponsored 2 early act clubs and an interact club, and we have done a lot, I think, for youth in the territory, and we will continue to do so.